All right. Next up is Ryan Anderson. This is the last flash presentation.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about really kind of plans, not a lot of action yet, but plans for better serving our limited English proficiency communities in Washington State, and really the conditions that motivate this. We're very familiar with increasing fire risk due to climate change, our fuels conditions, and an increasing population living in the WUI, the wildland urban interface. And then in states like Washington, and I don't think this is anything new, but you're more aware of it, is that we've got population changes, and so in the state of Washington, typically folks from Spanish-speaking countries and cultures have been more of a migrant population, moving towards work in agriculture, but more and more folks are settling down here, and so and becoming permanent residents. So there's an increase in people from Hispanic cultures and countries in Washington, and increasingly percentage-wise, members of our community are Spanish-speaking or dual language speaking, but Spanish is their primary language at home. So in eastern Washington, we've got some of these counties here, greater than 40%. Some as high as 60% in Adams County in Washington are reporting themselves as Hispanic in the census data. So, and then sort of it's well established that immigrant and LEP communities are often underserved during disaster response and recovery. And this there's a pretty good report, a white paper by the nonprofit One America called "Filling the Gaps in Equitable Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Relief Policies Serving Immigrants and Refugee Communities." And so there was a couple. They highlight a couple instances, and some of our other partners have highlighted a couple instances in 2014 and 15, where say Google Translate didn't work out so well, and there were signs posted on telephone poles, in Spanish, effectively instructing, well, not effectively, but ineffectively instructing, people to climb the telephone pole in case of fire, and just bad translations. There were some not so good results with some folks being turned away from disaster relief services because they didn't have papers intact, and there's some subsequent staff changes of those organizations that turned people away because they didn't have papers. But and then there was some highlights. I think the Chumstick Coalition was able to work with local groups to get some material translated quickly and effectively, and then out the door and sort of into the hands of community contacts that could effectively communicate during the Carlton complex. And then there's been a lot of good work. So the gaps that we sort of identified and that paper highlights is that organizations before the fire didn't have good cultural competency or sufficient cultural competency, and they didn't have readily available translated material. And like I said, some attempts at translation weren't effective. And then one of the things that really popped out to me, being kind of the Washington network guy, is that pre-established relationships between organizations weren't sufficient for sort of an effective, I guess an effective response or an effective recovery. There were some local nonprofits in the Methow Valley after the 2014 Carlton complex and 2015 Okanagan complex that recognized, a big portion of their community needed help, but they didn't have those pre-established relationships with their, Spanish-speaking and Hispanic culture spark plugs. So that's been a gap. I think we can advance slides if there's more. Is there another? Yeah, there we go. So we've kind of got, an idea of some of the gaps, and we're starting to develop, a better sense of where to go. The Washington State Emergency Management Division has hired an LEP coordinator who's done a lot of work with local jurisdictions to start figuring this out. Incidentally, his name's Rafael Estevez Jr., just a really, really dynamic and smart resource, as far as, emergency management. And incidentally, he's trilingual, so he speaks English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. So he's a great resource, knows a lot of folks. There's a new website in Yakima Ready, and it has material ready in all sorts of languages, including Spanish. And the city of Yakima has done a good job of getting this need into its hazard mitigation plan. That folks probably know, but if you don't, the Ready, Set, Go website's got a Spanish language toolkit. The Chumstick Coalition's made some strides here. They've utilized local students to translate some material. And there's various efforts, such as we have a local law organization, the Northwest Justice Project, and the One America Group, as well as there's a state policy roundtable that's got an ongoing discussion on forest health and fire adapted communities, and we've gotten the LEP, the limited English proficiency talk, into that group, and then a local nonprofit, Room 1 up in the Methow Valley, has started to build its relationships locally with the Hispanic community. So, for folks that don't know, I coordinate the Fire Adapted Community Learning Network here in Washington, and we sat down at a workshop and looked at lots of ways that WAPAC could help with lots of things. And one was the LEP Community Challenge. And we looked at, to get these pre-established relationships, we need to find folks that are already working on with these populations and get them involved at different levels, get them involved in a steering committee, and find community contacts and partner level contacts for our network. And some other things we thought we could encourage is hiring relevant organizations to complete translations for us, and so we're transferring knowledge through that working relationship, and then at the same time looking to recruit people that communicate in 2 languages or 2 cultures or more to get qualifications, either training in FAC or training in Firewise and home ignition zone training, and then to get them their qualifications to be part of incident management teams. So not only are they a resource from the perspective that they've got the training and qualifications for the specific technical skills we need, but they're also a resource in that they've got cultural competency built into their into their qualification package. So yeah, and so it's a to be continued process where we're going here, and we're hoping this works. We don't know exactly what it'll do, but to be continued.
Great, thanks, Ryan.